Australia has just banned social media for people under the age of 16. Or at least that's the headline. The actual story is so much messier. It's so much bigger than just Australia and so much more than just a ban. This is a world-first piece of regulation. The first time we have actually seen big tech be put in its place. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because here's the thing. On one hand, it looks like an obvious win. Social media is the new smoking, and the world is ready to wake up and rein it in. It's been praised by world leaders and celebrities, watched like a hawk, and of course, embraced by the author who got the snowball rolling, Jonathan Haidt. But on the other hand, the idea of a social media ban has attracted some unexpected critics. Experts in mental health, technology, and communication. In fact, late last year, over 140 of them got together to write an open letter to Anthony Albanese and the Labor government to say, please don't do this. There are better options. We agree that the problem that you've identified is a problem, but a complete ban is not the solution. So what's going on? It looks like this story is going to go global, and it is definitely worth us investigating. And on a personal level, it is weirdly dense with my interests. How technology affects mental health, the impact of social media on young people, the regulation of big tech, propaganda wars from media companies and governments, critiquing concentrated power, and even my home country. But despite my closeness to every one of these topics, clarity didn't feel close at all.
Prime Minister here, and I wanted to speak to you directly about something very important.
My aim with this video is to understand how to understand this issue, because I think that's the biggest problem. There's this beautiful line in Naomi Klein's Doppelganger where she's talking about all of the various injustices within the world, and she says that the problem isn't that we don't know about these things. The problem is that we don't know how to know them. We don't have a model that makes us feel like we can do something or makes us feel like we are active participants in history, or that any of this information has any kind of significance beyond it just being news. And to me, the social media ban, as it's called, is the perfect embodiment of a very, very murky, nuanced issue.
From December 10, if you're under 16, you're no longer allowed to have a social media account. You'll know better than anyone what it's like growing up with algorithms, endless speeds, and the pressure that can come with that.
So on paper, it is a social media ban for children under the age of 16. And within that, we have three definitions. Firstly, we have social media, which refers to 10 specific websites. At the moment, it has the usual suspects: Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok. But the list itself is not static. It will change as new social medias, things like Yope, which has come in to dominate the market, start to get a bit more traction. They will also very likely make it onto the list. So that's social media. Then we get to the word ban, which just means complete restricted access. You just cannot use it. And this is set to be done by the companies themselves to geo-lock and age-lock themselves out of Australia. The fine is just under 50 million Australian dollars for companies who don't act in line with the legislation. Then we get to the definition that is deceptively simple. For children under the age of 16, what does that mean? Now that might sound like a stupid question, but it's actually kind of terrifying when you think about it. To be under the age of 16 in this definition doesn't just mean that you are under the age of 16. It means that you are provably under the age of 16. And that provably can be a very slippery slope. This gets real weird when you look into the actual mechanics of who verifies their age. Is it the government? No, it's the companies. It's the private companies. They've put the onus on them. That's weird, man. We'll get to why later. But first, I want to be fair. I want to go through the best arguments for the ban, then the best arguments against the ban. In a good faith interpretation, the story goes something like this. Social media is bad for your brain. Social media is bad for teenage brains. One of the most harrowing stories about Facebook's complicity with the erosion of teenage mental health takes place in Australia. From the Facebook whistleblower, Sarah Wynne Williams, when she describes an advertising executive trying to sell more beauty products to teenage girls. The strategy is to target them when their self-esteem is at their lowest, because that is when they're most likely to purchase, is what he's saying. And the way that they identify when a teenage girl is feeling at her lowest self-esteem-wise is when she has just deleted a photo of herself from Instagram. I'm feeling good, no likes. Now I feel terrible, beauty ad. Buy this makeup. It'll complete you. It's horrible, man. Horrible. Social media being bad for teenage health is a very believable premise. It needs a lot more nuance and evidence than what has been provided, but from a political point of view or a layperson's point of view, it's a very digestible narrative. The solution, says the Albanese government, is therefore complete abstinence from these god-awful platforms. That god-awful is my conjecture, by the way. I do agree with that. Now, there is a lot to say about a complete ban as a solution, but before I get to any criticism, I do just want to steel man that as well. I think one of the better arguments for that would be Coke versus Pepsi. So it was the 80s and Pepsi had a Coke problem. Didn't we all? Ha ha ha. No, Pepsi's problem was the competitor Coke. And what they were finding is that a lot of people were drinking Coke and not drinking Pepsi. However, if they had drunk Pepsi before Coke, if they had drunk Pepsi when they were younger, they would find that they would stay with Pepsi. And then Coke found the same thing with Coke. They found whatever got to the child first stayed with the adult first. So knowing this, they were able to move a whole lot of advertising budget and direct it straight at kids. That's not evil. And the big tech giants, the Zucks of this world, have done something similar. They try get in first, become the platform of choice, get in before the person's brain is totally formed, and then by the time they turn 18, they've got them for life. So this legislation effectively threatens the entire business model for these giants. If somebody else gets there before they do, they don't get their lifers. They age out. Instead of retaining power for another generation, their critical window of influence is taken by somebody else. Somebody hopefully with better ethics and better morals. In the language of the Pepsi-Cola wars, this could make Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok neither Coke nor Pepsi, but instead Sam's Cola, LA Ice, and Dr. K. Could the Pepsi and Coke be a decentralized alternative? Maybe something offline? Well, that brings us to our third charitable interpretation, and that is the implication. The implication that you can regulate big tech or boss them around, I think it's kind of cool, if for nothing else other than pushing the Overton window on what's possible for regulation from a staunchly anti-monopoly lens or an anti-corporatist lens. I am impressed by the scale to which a government can bully big tech. The fact that companies do have to capitulate to states is mild hope for anybody who is not a neoliberal. It's arguably a precedent for good regulation. In this line of thinking, one positive effect that has already come of this is Reddit has decided to self-regulate before it gets banned in other countries. So it's self-regulating for people under the age of 18. And that's really interesting. It's interesting just to be like, so you could have done that the whole time. You could have been kinder to teenage mental health the whole time, and you didn't. You didn't until you were threatened. And in that way, I have some very cautious hope about seeing such bullish regulation. It's cool to know it's possible. All right, so that's the steel manning of the premise, the solution, and the implications. Now I want to critique it. I guess I'll use the same format. Start with the premise, go to the solution, end up with the implications. Alrighty. So the premise, social media is bad for teenage mental health, is just way too broad to take seriously. There are good parts to social media. However, it must be said that what is good about social media has nothing to do with the private companies who currently own the social media giants. The good parts are the fact that you can connect to other people, the fact that you have access to other people if you might not have physical access to them. And all of these things are really important to teenagers growing up, particularly ones who are marginalized, like queer kids who feel like they just do not fit in their community, but can at least find some sort of friendship online, or disabled kids who might not be able to get out of the house quite as much, but still have the exact same desire to connect to other people. That is what it does really well. I will not give any social media giant credit for any of that, especially when Meta wiggled their way out of a lawsuit by saying that they're no longer a social media company. According to them, they're just another media company, just another big television. So it's like, you guys don't even believe that you do that. But it is very much worth recognizing that there are good things to this technology, which leads us to talking about the solution. If you're gonna take something away, probably good to replace it. I don't know, man. I understand that the thinking from the government is get back onto the footy oval, go play netball, go hang out with your friends, and that's great. I also like that. But you can't pretend that banning social media doesn't make a vacuum, and that vacuum won't be filled by terribly bad actors who are way less regulated. I'm gonna spell this one out because I have not heard anybody say this clearly. There are two markets that have been created. The first is for kids. You have so many children under 16 who are looking for an app on which to share personal information, a bootleg app that will go undetected. The second is for somebody who wants what those kids are posting, their data, photos of children under the age of 16, schedules, addresses, and live locations of children. That is the second market. Maybe it's because I'm a CSA survivor myself that my head goes here, but like, kids' photos in the age of AI, man. Like, did nobody think this through? To be clear, I truly hope that all of my concerns are in vain and that the ban works the way Albo says it will. Alright, so now let's look at the implications. Anytime a politician or a massive media conglomerate says that they're doing something for the kids, just be suspicious. So remember earlier when I said that proving your age could be a slippery slope? Let's slide down. The current age verification system, which falls on the companies, reads like a menu of future scapegoats. Facial age estimation, providing credit card authorization, a bank card, a passport, a selfie. Truthfully, it makes me suspicious because I don't have a lot of faith that this verification system will last very long. Partially due to hacking, everything from proxies and mirror versions of the apps to fake mustaches and makeup wrinkles being used to trick face filters, all the way to a new black market for jailbroken accounts. Meanwhile, a $50 million fine for the social media companies, who are already lathered in legal Teflon, might not lead to the strictest enforcement of rules on their part. And when this verification system fails, I imagine that the government, the Murdoch media, and anybody else involved with the 36 months campaign will be drumming up more and more support of how vital it is for Australia to lead the way and commit to this experiment. But how do you do it when the verification system fails? Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. One answer would be to pivot to state-authorized digital IDs, not as an option, but as a requirement. And not just for children, for everyone. Slip down this slope one more time with me. How far does this go? No VPNs, social credit scores, getting denied a job, not being allowed to rent a house, instant subpoenas, blacklisted by banks, no flight lists, total digital surveillance. To bring that in all at once would sound too many alarm bells, but it does seem like they're bringing in a system that's designed to fail to give way to it. And there are so many consequences we could talk about. A lot that organizations like the EFF have compiled really well, but for the sake of brevity, let's focus in on two big issues. The first is data breaches. When you have private companies verifying this data, which is currently how the legislation is set up, it's on the companies to verify the user's age. While they can promise all the encryption in the world, there is still a vulnerability there. This is a lot bigger than just losing, say, your email and password. It's losing the thing that would theoretically verify your email and password as things that belong to you. So that's one concern I have there. And then the other concern is the dystopian one. I think the one that everybody can see from the outside looking in. The fact that digital IDs are a short walk away from total digital surveillance. It would be naive to think that we don't have a lot of digital surveillance already going on, that we don't already live in a digital surveillance state. But once a digital ID becomes commonplace, all the people who are currently working so hard to help everybody reclaim their online privacy, a verified digital ID puts their plans on life support. All of that stuff is what Tony Benn said, tyranny in the guise of liberation. But the other big critique I have is how this issue has been framed. It's incredibly dangerous. It is natural to think of all issues as one side versus another. I think we've all been trained to do that throughout our lives. Good versus evil, bipartisan politics, and pretty much every sport. We are trained to think like this. And sometimes this training gets weaponized. You vote for the douche or the turd sandwich. And when this issue gets reduced into two sides is social media is bad, we need to ban it outright. Government overreach is bad, it leads to tyranny. The first argument has two big problems. It's unimaginative in terms of solutions. It's just like, don't. And as a result, it has the potential to cannibalize solutions, proposed solutions. And then I get real nervous about equating heavy-handed regulation with tyranny or government overreach or authoritarianism. While that is absolutely true, and there are countless examples that prove it, it is also true that the thing that they are trying to regulate is itself tyrannical. While yes, banning access to social media is a form of censorship, the social media that they are banning access to is notorious for censorship. Don't get me wrong, taking away social media is a lot worse for press freedom. It's no secret that one of the biggest advocates of this ban was the Murdoch press, who in the 2010s lost a lot of money when they had to compete with social media. The reason that I bring up social media censorship is not to say it's okay to ban them, but to encourage us to think of new possibilities beyond the current social media, something that threatens both social media censorship and the Murdoch press. The real trick with this binary framing debate is not that it makes you pick a side, it's that these sides make sure you don't pick the debate. You can have two different opinions on both of these issues, one about social media, one about government overreach, and odds are they will not align with the loudest voices on each side. When people lean into binary framing, it's usually because they want one of the outcomes. And it's not long before each side arms up with their thought-terminating cliche, where they each become soldiers of some amorphous concept. Protect the children, protect free speech. Meanwhile, this side is working with a government who literally is jailing children. And this side, they censored evidence about this issue. So the first framing will be to reject the frame. Or at the very least, question who's actually being protected. I know I talk about Marshall McLuhan a lot on this channel, and I'm going to do it again. When it comes to critical moments, when technology and media are set to change our world, McLuhan observed that our imagination was often stifled by what he called rear-view mirror thinking. Only looking at what's been done in order to plan the future. As opposed to realizing that you don't have to be relegated to picking between broken systems, you can make one. Which is kind of the crux of this video. Social media is just a technology, like cutlery or a table or a sewing machine. Blaming an entire technology when you could be blaming an unethical company and some really predatory programming works out pretty well for the company. Meanwhile, you shut yourself off to the technology's actual potential. This magical tool, powerful enough to change society. Instead of wondering what this influence might look like in an equal and opposite direction, what this code could look like in benevolent hands, you sink back to the status quo. If we think of the technology as neutral and the people who deploy it as its moral value, a lot of possibilities open up. But if we ignore this, if you don't have a vision for what to make, this ban solution is just a band-aid solution. All right, where do we go from here? Well, what I think is lacking is a model to understand how to critique what has happened here. And I would like to offer one. I wanted to come up with a model. I have opinions on what should be done, but at the end of the day, that'll just be my opinion. But what's more important is I've realized that this conversation is going to be had around so many dinner tables, not just in Australia, but in the world. There'll be teenagers and parents just talking past each other. There'll be podcasts that just talk in circles. There will be so many conversations about this. And if those conversations aren't productive, they are hot air. So first things first, there are two very different conversations going on. One is about social media regulation, and the other is about compulsory digital IDs and total surveillance. I suspect the social media conversation will be more common, so we'll start with that. And most conversations about big political issues do tend to fall into that one side versus the other. So I wanted to make a model to talk about this issue in a way that was easy to understand, easy to remember so you don't have to write anything down, but still somehow magically necessitated nuance. And then I realized that the answer was literally right there in the name. The companies that we are talking about, broadly, we could call them social media tech platforms. And I was looking at these words and I'm like, oh my God, it's right there. This is how we talk about this issue. You break it up into 4 parts. You talk about the social aspects, you talk about the media, you talk about the tech, and then you talk about the platforms themselves. I will show you what I mean. When people talk about these companies, these social media tech platforms, without definition, they could be talking about 2 completely different things. The idea here is to separate aspects of them by default. First, talk about the fact that it is social. This is the digital equivalent of human interaction. Then have a discussion about the actual content that's there. The media, what you see, what you don't see, what you get served, what ruins your day. Then discuss the tech, how these functions are facilitated, often using predatory tools, and talk about how these tools modify your behavior. Finally, I would encourage everybody to think about the monopolies, the ethics of privately owning the internet. Truly question whether the online equivalent of our third space, our parks, our roads, something that everybody uses, should be privately owned and constantly surveilled. And by splitting this label, this ordinary label, into 4 different discussions, we can come to conclusions that are a little bit more nuanced than just outright banning something. Conclusions that we might find somebody who we would have disagreed with, we actually do agree with on certain aspects. And that's really, really handy. So that's talking about social media. When it comes to talking about digital IDs and total digital surveillance, there are 3 different models I want to offer. The first is to predefine your Rubicon. What's a deal breaker for you? You might not fear the loss of privacy. You might see the upside of having no online anonymity. But you will have a deal breaker. If everybody could access your webcam, for example. But changes, when they happen gradually, you might not notice that your Rubicons are getting crossed. By the time you get to what you thought was your deal breaker, the circumstances have changed. Your standards have lowered. Instead of a slippery slope, it's an imperceptible slope. To combat this, write down a line that, if crossed, would make you take action, whatever that action might be. The second is, I mentioned Tony Benn before. Simply ask, here's 5 questions of power. What power have you got? Where did you get it from? In whose interests do you use it? To whom are you accountable? How can we get rid of you? As for the third model, this one is about recognizing the way that shocks get used to support an agenda. I think I started this with an idea from Naomi Klein, so I'll wrap up with another one from Naomi Klein. A much earlier book of hers, Shock Doctrine. She talks about how there are windows wherein ideas that have been floating around the consciousness find their time to strike. Often this is used in very bad ways. After a terrorist attack, there is a war that gets possible. When everybody's scared, war gets justified. A town gets destroyed by a natural weather disaster, up go the casinos. It's, pretty depressing stuff. This lens is a helpful way to understand the not so charitable interpretation that social media and the regulation of it is being used as a shock, and the actual aim is total digital surveillance. Things that would confirm this reading are every time there is a shock, the news media or the government finds a way to link it to protecting the children, or the need for stricter online safety, or claiming that something that did happen wouldn't happen if the internet was more censored. This would be the shock doctrine thesis at work. But in the same logic, there is an implication that moments of instability, or moments when the veneer of power is actually pulled away from corporate giants, and we see them for what they truly are, I want to believe that these are also times when good ideas can fill the space. Socialize the social, mandate motives over media, tame the tech, and platforms, not pyramids. I would like to socialize the social aspect. I would like a digital internet infrastructure on which people could connect that was publicly owned by the commons. In the same way that nobody owns space when I am talking to somebody in public. No one is owning that. Why should somebody own it digitally? If you have architecture that's privately owned, whatever it is, call it data, call it money, will always get siphoned off to whoever owns that thing. But there is infrastructure on the internet that is not privately owned. Things like protocols, like the HTTP at the start of every website. No rent is paid for that, but it's still infrastructure. The difference is that the architects of Web 1 went for the penicillin approach, not for the neoliberal own everything approach. They said, this is general purpose technology that everybody should have access to. It should not be patented, it should not be privatized, it should just be. Mandate motives over media. So media is something that if you start to police it, you can fall down a very slippery slope very quick. I mean, even right now, if I wanted to go to the US, like right now, I would be judged on the past 5 years of my social media activity. That's weird. That is a lot to think about. Whereas free speech doesn't find its way to tyranny quite as quick. There will be consequences for what you say, but there will all be social consequences as opposed to state mandated consequences. Which is why I think mandating media can get real problematic real quick. What we can influence is the incentives that lead to that media. Hence, motives, mandating motives over media. I love words. Social media is a perfect example where incentives have just ruined what we might call art. Because the incentives are, keep you on the platform for longer. We didn't set those incentives. The people at the helms of these platforms did. They set the rules of the game, and then everybody flocks to the game and they start playing it. Can you blame them? Can you blame people for saying, okay, clickbait has material gain. Exploiting the entire range of human emotions has commercial gain. These aren't things that people would do if those incentives weren't there. and those incentives can be shifted. This technology is not as mysterious as these companies would like you to think. We can optimize for something that isn't engagement. We can optimize for education, for intelligence, for kindness. The kindest person wins. Imagine that. Imagine that if empathy was like the top thing that we made all these AIs train us for. Because these algorithms are training us. They are. They are making our behavior different. They are hacking us. So why are we not putting better incentives there that align with humanities? If it is going to be this gigantic behavioral change miracle machine, why wouldn't we use this incredible technology for something good? And that's not rhetorical, by the way. The answer is once again motives, incentives. Because their incentives are set. Shareholder growth. How do we maximize it? How do we keep maximizing it? How do we grow? How do we grow? How do we keep getting bigger? Anyone who is familiar with even the most basic critique of capitalism will know if the only metric that you're meant to chase is money, it leads to exploitation pretty freaking quick. But if governments can tell big tech what to do, as they have this week, that is one change that I wouldn't mind seeing. Now we get to technology. Tame the tech. May I suggest the following regulations instead? The first one, greater UI and UX control over the platforms themselves. This is something that is looking like it will happen in Europe and something that Reddit is already anticipatorily doing to themselves in order to soften the blow of what they see as an inevitable government-led tidal wave. But enforcing UI and UX that provably does not cause addiction, that is not geared towards engagement, constant engagement, would be a very good place to start. The casual version would be asking the platforms to stop things like the infinite scroll, stop things like incessant notifications, not drip feed things in order to keep people on the platforms, not show rage bait. A better version would be to give people the opportunity to customize those controls for themselves. And if we can regulate with this heavy-handedness, then surely we can ask for that. The second is algorithmic transparency. We want to know why things work the way they do. There was a really interesting project a few years back called VeirTube, wherein a website showed you different homepages of YouTube based on different psychographic profiles. So you could say, hey, what would a liberal or a conservative see? Or hey, what would a climate denier see? Or what would somebody who's really into conspiracy theories see? And what I liked about it is it makes the thing that we all know that's going on, the filtering, the atomization, the fragmentation of people, it makes it obvious. You can see it right in front of you, like this. This is reality. But it's not. So an algorithmic transparency would be freaking nice, man. Knowing why things get recommended, knowing how things get recommended, being able to audit these companies in their algorithms. I mean, if you want to take it further, algorithmic control. Let the user set the controls. How would you like to be at the end of this phone session? I don't know. I want to feel like I can make some change in my life and the world, and I want to be out of here in 30 minutes. Say that and have the algorithm respond. Wouldn't that be nice? Terrible for shareholder growth. The third regulation I have is enforcing digital interoperability. The switching costs between platforms is made intentionally high so that you don't leave. This isn't an accident, it's a strategy from these companies, and it's an issue that regulation has a really good shot at fighting. So consider the idea of leaving a platform. We'll use 3 examples. Spotify, where you've got all of your playlists, great platform to leave. Something like Facebook or Instagram, where you've got personal photos, you're in contact with all of your friends and family there. And then something like YouTube. Maybe you're a creator and your body of work is there, your subscribers are there, or maybe you're a consumer, but only of particular things. And how nice it would be just to take those and put them in a less insane environment. We all feel the temptation to get off all of these platforms, but there are designs and controls to keep us there. The switching costs. What are the negative repercussions in leaving an entire platform? What do you leave behind? What interoperability laws could potentially do for this tech is say that you leave nothing behind, just the platform. You can take all of your content. You can even take the access to whoever your followers are, take them to another platform, have whatever it is that you have made owned by you. Actually submit these so-called capitalists to capitalism, to free market competition, see how they actually do. Realize that nobody actually likes them. Wouldn't that be fun? If you are curious about interoperability, I thoroughly recommend The Internet Con, How to Seize the Means of Computation by Cory Doctorow. Amazing book. Which is where we get to platforms, understanding these platforms. My view is that these platforms should be a platform, not a pyramid. Right now they are structured like pyramid schemes. Literally. It's weird, man. It's just literally labor theft. Trickling up, trickling up, trickling up. Like Spotify is a really good example. People making all of this music. Meanwhile, they're getting told that their music is worthless. And then Daniel Ek at the top is getting all of that. It's all flowing up to him at the top of that pyramid, and now he's worth $700 billion and he is not doing good things with it. All that to say, inequality is a pressure cooker. And right now it's not just income inequality that these platforms are making, but a gigantic power imbalance. But imagine, in that same Spotify example, if there were unions, unionized musicians who could negotiate with Daniel Ek, who could say, hey, right now we're getting 0.003 cents a stream, and the majority of that is going to some other person, some label, some middleman. The artist is rewarded last. Now, if there were a union that could negotiate with Spotify and threaten to take all of that stolen labor away, then maybe the split might shift up to something that actually reflects who's done the work. And I understand, you might say that the platform's done so much work, the platform has to do so much moderation, but the platform is the most easy to replace part of all of this. And if we had stricter interoperability laws, they would feel that, because switching costs would be zero. People could leave platforms if they stopped serving them. And while I am deeply suspicious of the regulation baseball bat that Australia is tossing around right now, there is some hope. A non-corporately owned internet is possible. I truly believe it's possible. One where you have control, one where you own yourself. And implementing it almost definitely will take some sort of shakeup. If countries start to fall like dominoes like this, I think there's a non-zero chance it could happen. All right, that's it from me. Massive rant. Have a beautiful day. Get it.